far, and we have one. Darren's guest is
Ne-
having a problem
yeah,
screwing the light bulb in.
I'm
Uh,
sorry. I'm Ned Shatara. How are you doing, Darren?
Hey, how you
I'm
doing?
using my wife's computer. That's why it says Ms. Shatara, but I assure you, this is Ned Shatara. And I thank you for having me at your meeting today. I I apologize. I can't get the camera to work, but I swear to you, I am Ned Shatara.
I'm glad you were able to make it today, Ned. It's
Thank
great
you.
having you, of course.
Thank
And
you.
then here's the introduction, everybody. I guess Sensei, you want to facilitate that so he knows who everybody is?
No, you go ahead because I don't.
Okay. All right. I'll let each one introduce themselves. All great people on. Looks like we have a good little group today. The group really kind of fluctuates from session to session, and but it's always comfortable. And but let's go ahead and start with Sensei Kirby, and let him. Obviously, you know who he is because we talked about him a little bit, but he'll go ahead and start with his introductions.
Okay. Uh, First topic today is one vaguely called the door, uh, which refers to the door of your dojo, and it's kind of like at what point do we draw the line at what a student can or cannot do in your dojo? Uh, my sensei said his attitude was, if you don't like what's going on in here, there's the door.
Sensei, before we get started, I'm sorry, I meant to introduce Ned a little bit. That's what I thought
Okay.
we were about to do. That's why I was saying
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So let me explain who Ned. Ned was the sensei over at. I was in San Francisco, and they had the hospitality to let me come in and work with them last couple of days up in San Francisco at Zen Budokai, and Ned was he's one of the sensei there. They had a and I'll let Ned share some of the background with him so I don't mess any of it up. I don't want to do that. Ned, if you can kind of just talk a little bit about the background of your dojo, which I found very intriguing myself, and I think everybody would appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. The dojo was established in the late 1940s, early 1950s by Professor Duke Moore in San Francisco. And he had passed away in the early 2000s, passing the system on to Professor Tim Delgeman, who's currently the Soke of the system. My involvement with Zen Budokai started on April Fool's Day, 1989. And it was preceded by maybe about I don't know, maybe about 6 or 7 years of judo, Kodokan judo. And I was practicing both concurrently until I suffered an injury in the mid 90s. And I've been concentrating on Zen Budokai solely, with a little bit of karate here and there, not really accomplished in it. And it's a good group. I really love it, and I'm continuing with it till who knows when. The dojo, well, we've kind of bounced around. The original dojo kind of fell apart in the early 1970s, and we've been going from dojo to dojo, teaching our system. We're currently at the Soka Joshi dojo in San Francisco, which is the women's dojo that was established by Sensei Kieko Fukuda. She's the last surviving student of Professor Kano, who passed away in 2013. And her students are continuing with the dojo over there, and we're lucky enough to get a spot there. And we've been there for maybe the past maybe about a little over a year.
Okay. Okay, so
You want me to make the rounds of everyone here? You want everyone to kind of give a little bit about themselves to introduce back, Sensei, or How you would like that?
Well, we can say who's who and where they teach and give a brief summary. It'd be nice. I don't think we've ever done that. Then we'll get to the topics. Okay. And we'll start off with Thomas is in the upper left-hand corner, so
Okay. Not sure what to say. I'm Thomas Cylinder. I started the Arlington Jiu-Jitsu Dojo, which I think they still use that name, but they're no longer in Arlington. And I backed away from that during COVID as for other health reasons. And I started off in Baltimore, Maryland, and then became a student of Professor Kirby, including collecting a lot of air miles going back and forth for training. I think that's it.
okay. I'm George Kirby. I started Jiu-Jitsu in 1967 under Jack Secchi. And eventually in a couple of years took over at his, I'll say politely, his request. Bill Fromm and I took over the Burbank YMCA dojo. That eventually became the Burbank Parks and Recreation dojo. Then moved up to Santa Clarita in 1993. Started up here at the Santa Clarita Parks in 1994, and been here ever since. A couple other stints in various other places, but they're relatively minor. Dave, you're on next.
Yes, sir. I'm Dave Clark. I'm from Brandon, Florida. Dave Clark Jiu-Jitsu Consortium here in Brandon, and we're outside of Tampa. Got started with karate, and my karate sensei, a 5th degree black belt, Lee Jacobs, really enjoyed karate, but realized that if I was going to use it, it was going to hurt somebody. And when I started reading up on a parent martial art to karate, Jiu-Jitsu, I got in touch with Sensei Kirby. I mentioned it to my karate sensei, and he said, yeah, that's interesting, and let it go. 6 months later, when it was his idea, he said, Dave, I have an idea. Let's earn our karate black belts. I said, that's a great idea, Sensei. So we formed a consortium of 7 black belts, and we had plenty of ukis, plenty of training partners, and we quickly set about doing just that, and earned our black belts under Sensei George Kirby, and we're very appreciative and very thankful all these years later to still be able to count Sensei Kirby as a tremendous learning resource.
Okay, Darren.
Sensei, I think I don't need to waste any more time. I met Ned. He knows my background, I think, a little bit, and I'm a little comfortable with everybody else being familiar with who I am on the call.
Okay.
Darren Mellery, New Orleans, Louisiana, Jiu-Jitsu. How about that?
Lau, are you with us?
Hello, good evening. It is evening in the
Okay, we're losing your audio, Lau.
hello. Do you hear me?
We can
Hello.
hear you now.
Yeah. No.
Okay. I just want to take.
Okay, you need to clear up your audio, Lau, and we're going to proceed onward here. Okay. Our topic today is starting with the door, which is the door to your dojo. And
Yeah.
it's kind of inferring that you control what goes on in your dojo. And as I said before, my sensei Seki said, if you don't like what's going on, there's the door. He also referred to it, if you're learning another martial art, it stops at the door. When you come into my dojo, you're here to learn jujitsu. You're not here to proselytize your martial art or practice your martial art. You're here to learn jujitsu. So you have to leave everything else that you've learned at the door, kind of like a border or boundary. That creates some, and I've run into issues with it where I've had a couple of students who have, to me, it's one thing if you've learned something in another dojo and you bring it into my dojo, if you can incorporate it into what we're doing, I'll be okay with it for the most part. The problem arises when you start proselytizing what you're learning in another dojo over what's going on in my dojo, and you're soliciting students to go to the other dojo. And that's where I have to draw the line. And I've lost a couple of black belts because of that. I mean, they were great black belts, and other than that, they were terrific people. But they I guess they couldn't understand the concept, or I don't know. So does anyone have any thoughts on quote unquote the door, or what's reasonable for a sensei to allow or not allow to occur in their dojo? Someone?
Well, it seems like a gray area, because it's happened before in our dojo, and I would consider some of it acceptable and some of it non-acceptable. And you went through some examples of that. I mean, our system itself is made up of several jujitsu systems, and we teach a fundamental version of our techniques, which could be altered, but I require that the fundamental version be taught because or be practiced, because eventually that person's going to teach it. Okay. And if they can work their variant in the technique, then other people can do the same from the fundamental variant. Okay. If I'm making sense.
Yeah,
I think that I also think that makes sense, and that it just when you have an instructor leading a session, a class, and they're starting on a specific technique, and you have someone that comes in and they're advancing that technique, or even trying to show a different application or a different way of doing it. That person doesn't understand where the sensei of the class, what the objective is and how they're trying to develop that individual. So a lot of things could be more confusing to the individual that's maybe lesser experienced to be able to understand the technique from the basic element of it. And therefore they advance in it and they confuse them instead of helping them develop. And so that's just one piece of it. And then going back to what Sensei Kirby was saying, if you have someone that's in there trying to cross sell or trying to poach or trying to, take students, or even subconsciously not even aware that they're doing those type of things, that's just disrespectful. And I think that goes all the way back to, just proper dojo etiquette and formalities within the dojo, to be respectful for who the sensei is on the mat.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And again, I would say the fundamental version has to be taught first and learned first, before they start to dabble into other variants.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open to variations of techniques. Like you said, if the core technique is there, I'll just say, okay, this is another way of doing it. The issue is if the person comes in and says, it's not, I have a better way of doing it, but and yeah, it is a gray area, but I kind of draw the line when they start saying in class, you know, you should go to so-and-so's dojo. The issue is not the technique, but what they're saying to get people to go to another dojo.
Right. Yeah, that's
That-
very inappropriate.
Yeah, that to me is the issue. I mean, they're, you know, in jiu-jitsu, there are also, you know, you have the core technique, and there are many variations of it. Of any core technique. Some variations are good, some are more effective than others, some are dependent upon the person, the actual individual person, as to whether it's effective or not. There are a lot of variables there. If I'm teaching a particular technique, I'm teaching it to get a concept, usually get a concept across. And once they, as you said, Ned, once they get the basic technique down, then you can go into your variations, because now you have a foundation from which to work. And that's the key. KEYKICHI, whatever you want to call it, you know. That's the key to it. You know, they have to understand the concept of the technique in order to do the variables. And if the variables don't adhere to the core technique, that's when I guess you have to draw the line. I don't think I've ever said to a student, you cannot do that technique in this class. You know, because it's, how do you say it? It's
all jujitsu.
it's all jujitsu. And or I may say, okay, there's a better way of doing this particular technique or variation, and I'll show that. And then you leave it, you know, ultimately have to leave it up to the student as to what they're going to do, because they're going to do what they want to do anyway. It's sort of like a concept I picked up a few years ago. You know, people will believe what they want to believe. Until they're proven wrong. So, you know, it's if they believe a variation works better for them, and you know, you can't say you can't use it, because it may actually work for them. I've had variations that don't work for me that work for my students. I've even on occasion had students show, even if it's like purple and green, sometimes brown belts too, they'll find a better way to teach a technique than I know how to do. And you have to say, okay. And I have to change the way I teach that technique, because it makes more sense, how they're teaching it. And I think part of the issue is that if the students see that you are relatively open-minded, as long as the students are working within your framework, that they will respect you for that. Maybe the key is that if it's a variation, it has to be within your framework. But I don't think the issue is variations as much as proselytizing another dojo or proselytizing another system as being superior, or if someone walks into your dojo and wants to practice just Aikido, or they say, many years ago in the AJA, and some of you will recall it, we had a problem for, I don't know what, at least out here on the West Coast, I don't know whether you called it for religious reasons or what have, they didn't like the use of the word weapons. So we started using the term defensive tool. And that went into general use. And I still don't understand why that was done, but it was that was a decision that was made to keep a particular group happy or not offended. But in the dojo, I'll use the term weapon because anything can be used as a weapon. Or if you want to be politically correct, it can be a defensive tool. But that I don't think the issue is variations of techniques as much as it is the student's attitude when they come into your class and they want to do one thing and your plan is to do something else. Or if they consistently cause you problems in that area. And that's something that, how do you handle that? Or am I posing an unfair question?
I thought that part was the rhetorical one. I thought the answer was the door.
Yeah, that's why the door. That's why they turned the door, So is okay. If no one's going to discuss this, we're going to move on. Okay. Next topic is one that practicing outside the class or outside of class time. First question I'd like to ask on this is did any of you as sensei practice outside of class or outside of the instructional time on your own? Or did you was the only time you practiced, was that only time during class when you're with your instructor?
Of course.
I'll jump
Go
in
ahead,
here.
Dave. Sorry.
Yeah. Darren, you're welcome to take the floor. Go ahead.
Oh no, mine was quick, so I'll just say, of
Well,
course.
Mine's pretty quick too. And my answer is, of course. Definitely, you have to, because you're not going to grow enough to just teaching in class. You want to go ahead and do the work both on the mat with other black belts, but you also want to do it by visualizing and reviewing each day on, in my case, all the techniques of any particular belt level, and that is central in my thinking to being the best sensei you can. The other thing is to have a regular exercise regimen, because our dojo began with stretches and then the whole routine of push-ups, 40 push-ups, 40 walking lunges, and on occasion we call it core on the floor, but ab exercises. And so when I do my exercise routines 6 days a week, I am basically staying physically fit so that I can lead the class in that. Nobody can complain because they're gray-haired senseis doing more than they are physically. that removes all complaining. And that's also outside prep for class.
Anyone else have any? Whether you practiced outside of class? Can we do a show of hands? How many of you have practiced outside of class?
I'm raising my hand.
Okay.
As I've mentioned, I've taken jujitsu and judo concurrently, and I've used some of the stuff I learned in jujitsu in judo class that's legal, and it's another means of practicing it. Sometimes, especially when I was younger, you'd meet friends that kind of get a little physical with you in a playful sort of way, and you'd slip in some of that there to see how it works against somebody who is not familiar with the techniques. And that's a learning experience in itself, because in a dojo, people get accustomed to reacting a certain way to the techniques. That's not necessarily true for somebody who may be attacking you that is not familiar. You might get a totally different reaction from those people. Okay, and that's one thing to keep in mind.
Okay. Is there, I mean, yes, I probably put in, I'd have class with Seki maybe a couple times a week, or sometimes 3 times a week, and then I'd try to get another 4 or 5 hours worth of practicing with neighbor that lived next door, and we'd go to the local rec center that had 2 4x8 mats, which allowed us to rapidly learn where throws end up. And a concrete floor is not a good place to end up. So, so we learned how to do techniques, how do you say, tight. But my concern is that, do our students put the same commitment? I think if they could, they would practice more outside of class. Because if their intent is to do well and progress, you kind of have to do some practice. I think, especially as you move up in rank, you have to get some outside practice. So the question is, how do we get them to do this? If I had my own dojo and could financially afford it, I'd say, well, just come in. The mats are here. Have your workout time. I know some people get put some mattresses together, which in and of itself is a serious safety hazard. And they practice on those. For most people, I think the problem is finding someone they can train with on a regular basis outside of class. And, so how do we, is this a problem we as sensei really have to deal with, or?
I think everyone's kind of nailing it, Sensei. Subconsciously, consciously, when you're doing the extra, regardless of what it is, it's still kind of training, right? I mean, if you're, like Ned said, I liked what he used when he said, look, if somebody is, coming up to me and, maybe you're doing horseplay or wrestling or messing around with a friend, and you try to do something, not to injure them or anything, but just to see how the reaction is, or if it's effective in what you're doing, and if you can get to it. That's a sense of practicing. If somebody's looking at books and videos, right, that's also kind of a sense of practicing and or studying to be able to enhance your ability. The extra time on a mat, I mean, that's obvious. Whether it's on a mat inside the dojo, or if you're outside in the grass or in the sand, or hopefully not on the blacktop, but somewhere else that is not as hard as concrete, but that could absorb a little bit of something and maybe kind of work around taking the aggressive falls. But I mean, that's also extra stuff outside of class. And not only myself do I do it, but I practice that often, and I offer the opportunity to my students to have people want to do it outside of the scheduled classes that we hold. And so I think that's pretty common, and I think they come in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
Darren?
yeah. There are advantages. How do you say? If you're not using a public facility, community facility, you do have, like you have your own dojo or your garage, or that does give your students an opportunity to practice. Whereas I teach out of a local park, and basically the only time I'm allowed in there is during my class time, unless I get a permit, which costs money. You have, you know, and I have to be there. So this students could come and work out on their own time. You know, so a private dojo does have some advantages in that extent. So how do we get the others to practice, or how do we get them to maybe find someone else in a dojo they can practice with outside of class?
Sensei, in my experience with our dojo, the hobbyists would show up for class and not prepare at all outside of class. They really enjoyed the class. They would be fully present. They'd work hard in class, and they would not touch the subject again, except maybe to read a little bit, especially if I did handouts, but or prefer them to any of my books. But the passionate students would work outside of class, and a lot of times they had a sibling that was studying with them in our dojo, and they had a ready-made uke in the family, or ukis, families where there, you know, three people were participating. So you know, that worked out well. Darren mentioned the grass. When I didn't want to throw my mats down on the grass, or it had rained the night before, I've got a brown tarp, a large tarp. Just throw the tarp out on the grass. And you know, it's a whole lot softer than concrete. It's a whole lot softer than blacktop, and for us, it was fine. Even with you know, even with like Harai Goshi, Hani Goshi, some of the, you know, some of the more solid falls, it worked just fine for us.
I think the key, you know, for landing on other surfaces, and this is a skill that students need to learn regardless of technique, is controlling, if you can, controlling the person's fall.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I've been in a couple of situations where I've thrown a person and realized that they, you know, they were just trying to find out what I know without my foreknowledge. And I was on concrete, and I was able to, you know, quote unquote, pull up on the throw as they were going over. And yeah, they got some scrapes out of it, but they weren't, beyond the scrapes, they weren't injured, other than they were really surprised where they were going. And so I don't know whether this, you know, if we could do that and spend some time in the dojo doing that, helping students learn that skill, that they might be more inclined to practice outside of the dojo where they don't have mats, where they have to land on the grass or a mattress.
Sensei, for safety reasons, we worked on that and brought that topic up often. And yet there were still people, even some of the brown belts in our dojo, who just got absent-minded, and it was frustrating because they pull up, you know, often, but not always.
Yeah,
and
no,
sometimes they were throwing me, and as I'm slapping out really hard and you know, tossing out a ki, they realized I landed especially hard, and they just say, "Sorry, Mr. Dave." It's like, well, my thinking, I didn't say it out loud, just sorry didn't cut it.
well, only black belts are supposed to be perfect at that. But no, it's, you know, that's, you know, maybe this whole issue in getting students to practice outside of the dojo is, you know, if they weren't as afraid of possibly injuring themselves or their partner, they might be more inclined to do so. And so maybe we need to spend a little more time giving them those skills, which will actually help them in a real street situation. Because you may, or, you know, on the one hand, we're saying this person attacked you. Okay, it's okay to plant them into the concrete. on the other hand, what they did to you may not warrant planting them into the concrete, or maybe switching the technique halfway down so they don't end up face first and causing this, it's not your fault, but you don't want to cause them any more serious of an injury or incapacitation than what is necessary, if it can be avoided. And that's an important skill. We maybe, if our students had that skill, they might be more inclined to practice with each other, because they know their partner. If they see their partner in the dojo, the person they work with in the dojo is safety conscious, they might be more inclined to train with them outside the dojo. Am I making any sense? Or
Sure.
Absolutely.
One of the things we've done in class was to try to help them by training them how to practice outside. And that would be not actually completing the throw, do the fit in. And we would teach them in class, okay, here's the technique. I'm going to show you how to do it. Then you're going to go out and you're going to do 9 fit ins, and on the 10th one, do the throw. And if you're going to practice outside of class, just do the 9 fit ins, because that's a significant portion of the techniques, is just getting in position to be able to do the throw.
Right. I agree with you 100%, Thomas. I mean, it's so if we were doing a throw, Seki was, particularly Thursday nights were mainly for upper belts, and his routine was, I want you to do Koshinagi, do 20 kata no nagi, 1 throw. And kata no nagi basically meant you set the whole thing up, you start the throw, and then you stop before the person is actually thrown. And so maybe that's a way we can get our students to practice outside the dojo, maybe even with someone who isn't involved in the martial art, if that person trusts the jiu-jitsu student enough, so that he can get some practice in. I've had very limited, Seki said, well, take your belt, tie it around a pole or a tree, and practice your techniques. If you're holding the end of the belt, they could be the attacker's wrists, and you can do wrists and joint locks, techniques with that. You can get elastic bands or hip type or judo type throws, so that students have various amounts of resistance when they're trying to come in for a throw. I usually just tell my students, just make sure you don't wrap your belt around a rain gutter, or a clothesline, something that's not really secure. You don't want to rip the tree out of the ground. But there are ways to practice most techniques safely if you know how. And maybe that's what I'm saying. We need to spend some time with our students. How do you do this without another human being? How do you practice a teinagi without a human hand? Okay, I had one black belt who had a well-trained cat, and he could do hand throws, teinagi, on the cat, and the cat would roll over. Wrist lock, take the
Pretty
cat,
well-trained cat.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I know saying well-trained cat is an oxymoron. Most cats will say, "To hell with you! I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do that." But anyway, there are alternatives open to students to practice, and so maybe the question comes down to, how do we encourage students to practice outside of class?
Sensei, I'll mention again that the power of mental imagery. When you've practiced these techniques on the mat in the dojo in a 2-hour class, when you can go home and if you can do some form of practice, kata no nagi, with using forms or with another person, and you're using muscles and creating muscle memory. But you can also generate a form of muscle memory without doing it, just with the mental imagery of having done it in the dojo. It's powerful. And you can do it so fast compared to physically doing it. You can cover a lot of techniques in less time. So I encourage my students to use mental imagery to review outside of class. Ask football players who do the 2-minute drill in their head. The quarterbacks that do the 2-minute drill in the head before the game, before each game on the NFL. The 2-minute drill time comes, and everybody, look how cool-headed they are. Well, they've already done it in the locker room, and they're just playing it out the way they rehearsed it. So there's tremendous value in mental imagery, and I don't bring it up every class, but I bring it up at least once a month, with students. And using my books, they have the opportunity to do that. Using your books, they have the opportunity to do that.
And I want to thank you, Dave, because I just had a revelation that maybe for an additional way of reviewing is, Seki used to tell us, none of this stuff is written down. If you want to remember this stuff, you need to take notes. And if I didn't have the time to take notes in class, because I had my little notebook next to me, and there's a couple other people did too, is to go home and write the technique down. I know it's slower than the mental process of going through the technique, but again, if you have to write the technique down, you have to take time to make sure, ideally, that you're getting the information down right so that it makes sense and matches what's up here.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's another way of reviewing.
I just know, Sensei, that I missed more than one homily in church because I was going through jujitsu techniques there in the pew. Guilty.
Oh well,
I had a test coming up. I needed all the review I could get.
One tool that we have that we found useful is for the white belt curriculum, for the beginning curriculum on our website. We have all the techniques spelled out with the process of going through the technique. So a beginner who wants to review has that ability. It's all spelled out and they can review that. And of course, once they settle into the system, we don't do that for the subsequent levels, but for a beginner, I can see how that would be most important.
Okay. Anything else on practicing outside of class we want to bring up? Okay. Third topic probably today is using the correct terminology. And just a second here. And I know we all use our own, every system has its own terminology in whatever language it uses. And for example, we use tomo for stomach, nagi for throw. There's one system that refers to it, the cow. the cow jumped over the moon technique. I don't know what they call it in Japanese. With all that, you know, but I think part of the responsibility of the sensei is, regardless of what language it is, the technique was originally named. For example, Tenagi or Kote Gaish, same technique. Kote Gaish is a more modern term for Tenagi. Tenagi is simply hand throw. And just to backtrack a bit, and all of you know this, Seki used generic terminology for everything, which initially is confusing for students, because he might show, over the course of a couple months, he might show 5 or 6 different Tenagi, and they were all called Tenagi. But once the students realized that he was using generic terminology, they realized that there are different ways of doing a hand throw. And if I said to any one of you, do a Tenagi, all of you would be able to do a quote unquote Tenagi. You might each be doing it slightly differently, but it's still a Tenagi. For example, Tenagi, some instructors will say twist the wrist, and others, because I'm running into this issue, some instructors, I mean myself, will say you push the wrist in until it locks, and then you turn it, because you're trying to lock up the wrist, whereas twisting it won't necessarily lock the wrist. So sometimes we may have to explain our terminology, but we have to be consistent in the terminology that we're using. So the students know that when we say push, it's not the same as twist, or pull is, hand throw, for example, so they'll say twist and then pull the wrist, okay? Whereas what Seki taught it was to push, and instead of pulling, you turn the wrist. You're pushing and turning, okay? And that's different from pulling, twisting and pulling the wrist out, okay? So how we explain a technique oftentimes determines how the technique is executed to our students. And if you as a sensei are consistent with your terminology, almost anyone can follow you, what you're doing. I'm going to jump to Ashi Sabaki and Tai Sabaki. Anyone not know what those are?
I don't know what the first term is, but I think I'm familiar with Tai Sabaki.
Okay, Tai Sabaki is body placement. Ashi is foot placement. And some sensei will emphasize your body placement, how your body moves in executing a technique, and others will say, no, that's not important. Tai Sabaki, Ashi Sabaki is, which is where your feet are. Okay, well, foot placement is going to determine body placement. Body placement is going to determine foot placement. The other problem with that is that there are some systems, and this primarily comes from judo and some systems, jujitsu, where there will be, you've got this circle around you, and some systems will have like 8 positions. Some systems will have 16 positions around the circle. And as Seki said, there are 360 positions around a circle. I mean, he did not believe in that concept of 8 or 16. You know, you turn as you have to turn to make the technique work. But your foot, you know, yes, your foot position is going to control your body position. And these are, you know, do we clarify this terminology with our students, or what? Or am I having an unsuccessful day today with these 3 topics?
Well, my take on terminology is when you learn a martial art, it's like learning a new language. And when you learn a language, inevitably you learn something about the culture. Okay. So same thing in martial arts. You learn a martial art, you learn a little something about the culture. And jujitsu being a Japanese martial art, you learn a little bit about the Japanese culture and a little bit about mutual respect, which brings us back to your first topic about, you know, what do you do with somebody who brings another martial art into your dojo? You know, that's in my eyes, or in, you know, a lot of martial artists' eyes, that's disrespectful. So, you know, I think that the terminology kind of sets an atmosphere of respect, and that could be used to support other aspects in the dojo. If I'm making sense.
Yes, you are. I mean, I understand you.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, we use the terminology from Japan because ultimately it makes the most sense in as few words as possible. It's you know, Tai Sabaki means body position. It includes a whole, how do you say, whole bunch of other factors. Ashi Sabaki is a simple term, foot position, and it affects a whole bunch of different things. But if you use the terminology and students understand what the term refers to, like you said, it establishes the respect for a certain culture. It establishes a certain culture. It's ultimately an easier way for students to remember things once, and I think this is the reason that Seki used generic terminology. Once you get the generic terminology down, things tend to make sense a lot more than they do in English.
I think what you're saying is the terminology that you're talking about is a reference,
Yes,
the way people could relate to the technique versus the actual name of the technique, and it
yes,
becoming into a Japanese language, right? And then translating it into English. It actually means something. If you're saying Tai Sabaki, you understand what that means in Japanese when you translate it in English. Whereas you have another person may reference a technique by a term that is relatable to apply what you're asking them to do. So I think that's the difference of what you're looking at in terminology. I always feel like that the Japanese version is what you should do, which is what I think Ned was kind of alluding to, and saying that's how you practice it, because that's a part of the culture that you're doing. You know, you're looking at a Japanese, you're training in a Japanese system, then you're picking up pieces of their culture when you're training.
right. It's I was going to say, you know, again, taking the Tenagi, if I tell my students, I want you to do my Tenagi, which would be a forward hand throw, that essentially means they're going to be stepping forward. I don't have to tell them, if you're going, I want you to do my Tenagi, you have to adjust your Ashi Sabaki so that your left foot moves forward so that your Tai Sabaki is in the correct position. So now you can step forward with your right foot and execute the technique more effectively. I don't have to say all that. And that's part of quote unquote the specific application of the technique versus my ten. It's like if we said run off the cliff. Run off the cliff can mean a variety of different things. Especially what's the cartoon?
Roadrunner.
Roadrunner. Who runs off the cliff all the time. And it can also mean someone who does something really stupid. Or comes up with a stupid idea. It could also mean literally running off the cliff, which no one in their right mind would probably do.
Sensei, this may be a topic for another time, but I view it as very directly connected to the terminology, and that is it blocks and strikes by time for execution of technique, and therefore it's a good idea to include a block or a strike as part of technique. I'll give you an example. We do magic markers, usually washable, and put people don white shirts to learn defense from knife tactics. If I go up against even a blue belt and I don't use strikes or simulated strikes, my shirt is covered in ink, which would be the equivalent of my blood from a knife. If I can even simulate strikes and snag a takedown, I gain the upper hand. The point being that I'm aware that strikes buy time, and as such, the really effective execution of a lot of techniques on the street have got to involve buying that time, that 7/10 of a second, to then go into your technique. I go to do a Koshinagi, or I go to say do a Teinagi, somebody pulls away. They have the presence of mind to realize I'm attempting to grab a body part and do a technique. If I've just struck them in the sternum with my elbow and I've given them my back in the process, my Koshinagi is going to be a lot more likely to be effective than if I just go into a Koshinagi and they wrap their left forearm around my throat and pull backwards. I think that that might be a topic for another day, but when we talk about technique and the names of techniques, and Tai Sabaki, part of foot placement, Ashi Sabaki, would be placing your feet or your body such that you can do a strike to set up technique.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is write that up in a really simple form so I can get it. Just send me something around what you said, and I'll rephrase it to where I've got some notes written here.
Absolutely. What you're saying, Sensei, is I used 8 paragraphs and I could have done one.
No. I've got written down, this value distraction strikes or distractions, because they are an essential part of any jujitsu technique. You can't just go into, in many cases, you can't just go into a Teinagi. I mean, if someone's coming at me, I've only had to deal with one real semi-knife attack. It was a threat, okay? And my first move was actually this guy was stupid and swinging the knife from hand to hand. So I got in sync with that, knocked out of his hand, but my next technique was a palm strike to his sternum. And because he was stupidly sitting on a rail, there was nothing else I had to do.
I'd say that was 2 strikes, 1 strike to knock the knife and the other strike to knock him. Yes, sir.
Right. And it's just 2 simple strikes.
And the strike doesn't have to be debilitating. If it's just a slap on a really hard slap across the cheek or something, just something that distracts.
It's the both of those were distraction techniques. But sometimes that has to be students have to practice it. And because whatever they do has to be an automatic reaction. Because they're not going to have time to think about it on the street. So, you know, the even though distraction strikes are quote unquote seen as a minor element to a technique, they're important because they take the attacker's mind off of what you want to do. Had he remained sitting there after the palm strike to his sternum, and I don't know whether I don't think it broke anything on him, but the next move would have probably been a hand throw, because that's where my left hand was, close to his hand or wrist. But I didn't have to do that. You know, but the distractions, you know, that's one of the three parts. There has to, for an effective jujitsu technique, ideally, you have a distraction, you have the actual technique, and then you have your submission, or which is a nice term for saying finishing technique. And finishing technique may end up being, which is another topic we'll be getting into in the future, was what happens to this person after you throw him. So anything else on you want to deal with correct terminology?
George, I just want to comment on, we've had some issues in our dojo about terminology, and it came up initially and then kind of spread like a virus. Came up initially with a student that had been studying for a number of years with us and then started taking judo and decided that judo was the definition of all terminology. And we were sloppy and couldn't get it right. And even went after Danzanryu, which is much more like judo. They just have different terms. And I had to start telling people, look, every style of jujitsu or every style of pretty much anything, they're going to have different terms. You have to learn the terms that are there, understand what those terms mean, and don't assume that there's one right way of doing it. Most of the places that started jujitsu back in Japan, they didn't want anybody else to know what those terms meant. So they deliberately used some obscure terms to describe things. We're not trying to be secretive about it, but use the terms that are in this dojo and understand what they mean. And if they don't match up with what you've learned someplace else, understand that's just difference. It's not right or wrong.
Mhm.
If any of you really want to get into it, there are people that have written entire treatises on the proper spelling of jujitsu.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I mean, and it's, I won't even go there. I mean, there are different ways to spell it in English. There are different ways. I mean, Japanese is pretty consistent.
Right.
It's the romanization of
Right.
the kanji that causes problems. And my sensei, who was Japanese, used Jujitsu. Okay. You know, but you can get into this. I've even seen different spellings of the same word. And it all has to do with more with pronunciation in the English language issues than the Japanese terminology itself or the pronunciation. I think the strangest spelling I've seen of jujitsu was ZHU ZHU
See?
TZU.
Huh.
Pronounces jujitsu.
Sensei, to your point, the K and the G in the Japanese language,
Right.
apparently they have something they pronounce it somewhere between a K and a G, because you have Garuma and Kuruma.
Right.
And sometimes those are used interchangeably.
Yeah. And it took me years to learn. Someone finally says, screwed my light bulb in. If it's the first word, if it's a word that starts with pronounced with a K sound, that's because it's the first word. If it's the second, or if it's not the first word, the K sound becomes a G sound because of the flow of the language.
Wow.
Japanese. And it's like when I taught junior high, and for a while we had a lot of Vietnamese students. And there was a very common last name, Nguyen. If you were from one part of Vietnam, it was pronounced Nguyen. If you were from another part of Vietnam, it was pronounced Nguyen. And you had to, I would simply, the first day I would ask my students because I preferred that they use their correct names, not Americanize them. I'd ask them, how do you pronounce it? Because I wanted to pronounce, I wanted them to pronounce their last name correctly. When I moved to grad high school, I had a lot of Armenian students who they tried to anglicize their names and all this. And I said, look, wait 20 years, no one will care. Keep your Armenian name. This is Southern California, which is another issue. This is Southern California. People will learn how to pronounce your name correctly. That's part of your culture. That's part of your background. People should be able to do that. And, if you're exposed to other cultures, you get exposed to their language and how they pronounce certain stuff, and you learn to adapt. Like we do with K and G, Japanese words. It's a matter of adaptation and accepting, that culture, which is what we do with the Japanese terminology. And it does, even the Japanese terminology, if I go into someone else's dojo, different style, I'll use the Japanese and the English terminology, and then that sensei will probably say, oh, we call it something, yeah. I say, okay, whatever you want to call it, it really doesn't matter. It's what you do. And this is the technique we're doing. And, so language is usually our greatest barrier to understanding. And I think that occurs in many areas of our lives and the world. Kind of like there's an old saying of an American who went to Japan, and he had a meeting with all these Japanese businessmen, and everything he said, they would say hi. And then at the end, I think Lau knows what's going to happen here. At the end of the meeting, the American felt, oh, they agree with me. And so he said, oh, so you all agree with me? And they said, no, because hi was interpreted to mean I understand. And there's a difference between I understand and I agree. So, you can never assume anything. It's just a stupid little story, but it makes sense. Language is a fun thing to deal with, or it can drive you crazy. I used to joke with who was it? When I'd have you know, 'cause many languages you have rules and you have exceptions. English is one of them. I said the only language where you can't mess around with is German. Because German has rules, and damn it, you have to stick to those rules. Or you're in deep trouble.
Yeah, Germans still get very creative with their language. They have fun with it.
Yes, yes, I know. I mean, my parents gave me sayings, you know, that occasionally I'd use in class. And if I had a German speaking student, depending on where they had lived before, where their parents had come from in Germany, it determined sometimes they understood the saying, sometimes they didn't. But those things exist, you know, the local culture determines all these, you know, little sayings that people have. But we're getting away from jujitsu here. I guess the issue is that correct terminology is it's hard for us to do in when we start comparing different systems, because different systems have different terminology. What can I say? Or they have different spellings, or they have different ways of pronouncing a particular word or phrase. Okay. Anything else we want to deal with on terminology? Okay.
Sensei, I'll throw one tiny thing in here. We never even addressed dialects. As small as Japan is, I'm told there's somewhere in the vicinity of 50 dialects. Everybody speaks Tokyo Japanese, but there's all these dialects out in the countryside. We think English doesn't have dialects, but I know that I got to teach my northern cousins Southern when I go up there. So there is dialects. There are dialects, you know, in our United States in a sense.
Yes.
Go to Maine and listen to the lobstermen talk. They're speaking English, and I can't understand but every seventh word. So yeah, so throw in dialects, and you've really got a witch's brew of verbiage.
Yes. And I think every language has dialects, and you go to different parts of the US and people may not understand you or what you're trying to say, and you think, well, I'm speaking English. Go to England and try and follow someone there who speaks English.
Bloody frustrating.
It's really frustrating.
In Louisiana, you don't have to go far. It's not far.
No, right,
You get the
right.
cage and nobody can understand.
I'll go back to when I taught junior high. We used to have some educators would complain that there's a mix between Spanish and English called Spanglish in Southern California, probably most of the Southwest. It's a combination of Spanish and English. And one of the problems that they, quote unquote, educators were facing in Southern California was what was called Black Spanglish, which was a combination of Spanish, English, and Black or Afro-American slang. Because kids would come to school speaking Black Spanglish and would drive teachers nuts because they couldn't understand the kids. So yeah, you do have dialects. And we're just, for lack of a better phrase, we're stuck with them. Anyway, I think we're going to conclude today. Next week or the next meeting, we'll be dealing with value of control, which we've dealt with somewhat this time. How do you deal with students who challenge your thinking? And some black belts, but mainly traditional martial arts instructors, display a calm level of confidence combined with a great deal of humility. And the question is, why are we that way? Okay. I mean, I've met some instructors that were really loud, obnoxious, and whatnot. But for the most part, most black belts I've met are very, what's the term? I can't think of it. They're very
How about unflappable?
they're unflappable. They're
Open,
they what?
open to learning.
They're open to learn. They're receptive. They're have a great deal of humility. They don't walk around with. They don't go shopping in their gi. I haven't seen that for several years, but you know. But then their parents that take their kids shopping when the kids are wearing a gi, and I think somehow the sensei missed an important lesson. But in any case, so you know, those are the next topics. If any of you have any
iPhone, one, stage, two, science,
no problem.
present, science,
Anyway.
science.
Sensei, before we sign off, I'd like to thank Lau Lucas for
Yes.
joining us.
Yes.
And Ned Shatara, you guys brought some valuable points to our discussion today. And I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope you can join us again.
Yeah, and I hope you got the sound issue taken care of, Lau. And Ned, hopefully you find a way to turn on the video camera next time.
I'll have to consult with the wife, but
Okay.
I apologize for that. And I appreciate your time as well.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good weekend. We will be meeting again on April 20th. There was an announcement that was supposed to go out on this last Monday. Somehow Vertical Response, which handles my mass mailings, had a hissy fit over it. And I'm still trying to figure out why. They asked questions such as, how long have you had this list? Which I said, 2010. When was the last time you sent mail out on this? Yesterday. And I think what is happening is that whatever it is, program that's checking on their emails has gotten stuck on my account. So anyway, it will get cleared up, but I apologize for the late notification of this meeting. So
Sensei, would you mind adding Ned to the distribution, please?
yeah, I had a note here. I was gonna ask you to send me an email. I'm gonna see if I still have your email address. Ned's email address from the email you sent me, but could you send me his email address anyway, just in case I don't have it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And Ned, I assume you want to be on my mailing list?
Sure, yeah, I'd be interested.
And as I would say in an email, you can always self-delete in 1 or 2 clicks whenever you don't want to be stuck with this stuff in the future.
I'd be interested. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Want you all to have a good weekend. Take care. We don't know what our weather's going to be like this weekend in Southern California. And at least we're not in New Jersey. Is that where they had the earthquake yesterday?
Yeah, the whole New York to
New York.
Baltimore felt
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
In Southern California, sometimes we just call it shake and bake. It was during the summer. Anyway, have a good weekend. Take care. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye
Bye
bye.
all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.